Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where in this wonderful, weird, and sometimes wacky world you might be. Thank you so much for making Pride 365 part of your day. The big interview is back, and I have a very special guest joining me this evening, morning, afternoon, depending on where you are. Here we go. Let's rock and roll. Joining the Pride 365 certified big interview today is Pride 365 champion, Mr. Art Smith. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I will say that whenever I have a conversation with you, Art, I always feel great. I always feel inspired, energized. Everything that you do, talking to you on screen, I've done it a couple of times, you guys, with Art, and as you can see from his background and his colors and stuff, it's bright and energetic, and it always feels very positive. So that's how I feel today. Excellent stuff. Well, look, let's get stuck into it. I've been wanting and looking forward to this for so long now. As I said, Art is a Pride 365 champion, is collaborating and working with us on a number of exciting different projects that in the coming months you will all be hearing about it, I'm sure. But as you know, in the big interview, we like to dig deep and find a little bit out, about our guests, whether they're a certified partner or a champion. Now, Art, take me back a little bit before we get stuck into how we came to know you and all the wonderful things you're doing in the community. I do like people to share just a smidgen of their story, where you grew up and what your coming out story was.
So I grew up in New Jersey, just in the shadow of New York City. And I had a boyfriend when I was in high school, but I didn't know that there was such a thing as coming out back then. This was in the late 70s, mid to late 70s. And I was unaware that there was really a gay community. A few years later, that same boyfriend invited me to Baltimore, and we went to dinner, and then we went out for a drink, and he did not tell me that he had since discovered the world of gay bars. And we walked into the Hippopotamus, which was an iconic bar in Baltimore. And suddenly I discovered that there was a whole dance floor full of just men, and that there was actually a community. And so that kind of started my path to coming out. It took a number of years longer to actually come out to everyone, but at least I felt like I had a community behind me at that point.
Art, where in the States did you grow up? Because I'm gonna shift gears in a little bit here to Atlanta. But did you grow up in Atlanta?
No, I grew up in New Jersey.
New Jersey,
just outside New York City.
Very cool. So lots of summers along the promenade there and in Jersey.
Along the Jersey Shore. In fact, most of my family ended up moving to the Jersey Shore when I graduated high school. So we spent a lot of time down there.
Amazing. And your parents were cool? Your family cool? Did you have any kind of issues, problems? Because of course, the difference in today's world, and we have a lot of younger champions coming on board, and of course we have baby boomers and Generation Xers, where things were a lot different back then. Art.
Yeah, it was a little different. My mother had passed away by the time I came out. My father and I were never close to begin with. And when I finally did manage to tell him I was gay, I had to do it in a letter because I could never have him on the phone for more than about, 8 or 10 words. And then he would say, well, gotta go. So I wrote him this long, 10-page letter, eased into it, told him I was in good health and I was happy and I was, settled in my job and my new place and all that. And finally told him I was gay. And I said, and you have, take as much time as you need to digest this. It took me years to tell you, so take your time. And a few months later, he admitted to me that he had, read the letter and he knew I was gay and he was okay with it.
That's pretty cool.
Well, on the surface.
On the surface, yeah. Like how many of those on the surface moments have we all had?
In fact, he never was really okay with it. He never acknowledged my partners. when we would send Christmas gifts or cards or anything, he never even mentioned them by name, as if they didn't exist. And ultimately, we became estranged, and I did not speak to him for the last 25 years of his life.
Wow. So not cool at all, is how
Not
that ended
really.
up. Yeah, no, it's always tough. I see that a lot. And I'm sure you have too. We all have, where there's this, public acceptance, but really when you scratch the surface, it kind of crumbles behind the scenes, doesn't it?
Yeah, but the good thing for me was that pretty much all of my boyfriends after that point, their families immediately took a liking to me. Their mothers, said, "Oh, this is great. You can be part of our family." And so
Oh,
I had surrogate families.
that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's so wonderful. I love that. That's just what makes, and I think one of the things about, being gay, being in the gay community, you do that, you see so much of that, these blended beautiful families that have come together through all sorts of different experiences and stories, right? Art that kind of without them, you don't know what you would do.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's get stuck into then young Art, is getting his vibe together, and he's starting to feel confident as a gay man, and you start formulating kind of what you really want to do, what you're passionate about, and you find yourself in Atlanta in the 80s, and your media career kind of kicks off there.
Yeah, I was tapped by someone I knew to take over a gay nightlife publication there, which was called The Guide. It was part of a national chain. There was one in Denver and Boston and several other places. And so I took that over for Atlanta and found myself suddenly immersed in a life of gay. Uh, every, every contact I made when I went into a business to talk to them about the publication, I basically was telling them at this time, which was the mid to late 80s, I was basically telling them, "Hey, I'm gay, and this is
Mhm.
my magazine." And and that went on for a number of years. I
What was the reception like then, when you're kind of it's the 80s and the publications are few and far between, but yet growing, right? The scene has kicked in, and how are you finding the reception to what you're doing?
Well, in Atlanta it was a little different than a lot of other places. Atlanta was kind of at that time the San Francisco of the Southeast. Even
Mm,
though it was in the middle of the Bible Belt in the Deep South, Atlanta had a very developed gay bar uh, society there. A lot of gay bars in town, a lot of gay organizations, a large gay community, and it was very different than other places. So in Atlanta, particularly if you stayed in the in town area, Midtown, um, Ansley Park area, you were pretty well safe. It was not likely that you were going to run into too many extreme bigots and haters. So I had no major issues at that point.
so it's I love how then when did your passion start? So you got the world at your feet, you're discovering kind of what you want to do, you're entering the media space, and then you develop. Does your media career evolved greatly before you get passionate into the history of the gay bar scene, Art?
Uh, Not really. I mean, it helped because I, was able to write and knew how to do research and all the things that you do when you're involved in a media type situation. But they were really kind of disjointed. It did in some ways affect the development of Gay Barchives because the people that I met when I was doing the magazines in Atlanta are the same people that I connected with when I first started researching the history of gay bars in Atlanta. And that's where the whole Gay Barchives project started, was actually with one of my favorite bars in the world, which was called Backstreet in Atlanta.
Wow. Okay, so then the passion for all of this kind of really kicks in, and before you know it, you're chronicling, collecting. You have thousands of archives, pictures. like talk me through this a little bit, and what you're doing and why you're doing it, and the importance and the relevance of kind of your passion.
Well, I suspect it's the same all across the world, but I noticed in particular when I was looking into gay history in the United States, a lot of what was chronicled and what was recorded were things like riots and protests and legislation, things of that nature. But in my mind's eye, and in the experience that I had with other people I spoke with, mostly the bars were where all these things got their start. Everything started with the bar. Even the biggest protest or riot that we acknowledge regularly in the US is Stonewall, and that
Hmm.
started at a bar. And I said to myself, why is nobody recording or documenting anything about these places that were so important to where we are now? They were the places that allowed us to incubate, to meet and have, create groups and organize protests and do everything we did to get to where we are today with our rights and,
Mm.
the degree of social acceptance we have at this point. And I started doing it on my own. I said, well, I'm going to start digging in there and see what I can find out.
Yeah. And you found out a lot.
Yeah, fortunately, one of the things I did to do that was to create a Facebook group. And my Facebook group, which is also called Gay Barchives, now has I think, about 6,000 members. Um,
You sure
who
do. I was on it yesterday. You have 6,000 members and a community there that share and talk, and it's just wonderful.
and they love to talk about their memories of gay bars, their favorite bars that don't exist anymore, things that happened in those bars, um, whatever it is. There's constant communication with the members there, and they even post, like, for instance, one member yesterday was interviewed by the Nashville public radio station
Hmm.
about gay safe spaces and queer bars and whatever. And they share that kind of information too, which we would never probably stumble across had it not been for individuals, being so interested in telling everybody else about it.
Yeah. Art, you bring up a phenomenal point in the sense that, what, forget the stigma that was attached. Every movement, every where great things start, or where certain groups have to go off and create their own culture, whether it's restaurants, bars, whether it's being able to book a vacation or a holiday to feel part of something. And in a time where we were discovering ourselves, not a lot of that was really easy, and it was scary. And I even remember as a young person moving to the States, I felt like when I came here I was reborn. And a lot of that has to do with the bar scene. And it's not about going out and getting laid and all of that stuff. It's about connecting and being with like-minded people and having a safe haven to be who you are, show who you are, reveal who you are in some instances. And what you just said is so important, and it saved us, didn't it? The gay bar scene saved us.
It did. And whether or not you, as you said, you go there to drink or to hook up, that's not even the point. It was the kind of community center we had. Just like in the Black community, the churches were the meeting place for a lot of their activities and their development as a community. They
Mm.
were our churches. They were the places we got to go and feel like we were safe and feel like we could meet people who would understand what we were going through. And especially when you're talking about the 80s, when you had the AIDS crisis hitting, um, that was where everybody was. That's where everything happened.
Yeah. And that's generally where you were able to be with like-minded people. Otherwise, it was behind closed doors in your own house. So the social aspect of it gave people, this hope and this belief. Now, as you're journeying and you're chronicling all this stuff, like I said, it's not just about the fun element of it. There's some real crazy history in some of these places you visited. I want you to share a few with me, but there's also a place that you visited recently that I'd never heard of, a place in Florida called Walton Manors, which I hadn't heard of. And this is why I love talking to Art, you guys, because my education over the last few weeks since I've been introduced and I've been talking to him is like phenomenal. Tell us a little bit about Walton Manors, and then we can talk maybe about some of the other historical elements to what you've unearthed through GAYBARCHIVES.
So Wilton Manors is a small bedroom community that is just on the northeastern edge of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It is its own city, and it is surrounded by a forking river, which technically makes it an island. It is completely surrounded by water. It's only 2 square miles, so it's less than half the size of Key West. And it has only about 11,000 residents there. So it's a small community. But one thing that they have done very effectively, and partially by design, is they have created what I think may be the gayest place on the planet. Within that small 2 square miles of Wilton Manors, there are dozens of gay bars of every description you can imagine, going from bathhouse to leather to preppy to sidewalk bar to dance club. Whatever you're looking for, there's a gay bar there in that tiny little community. But in addition to the bars, there is a gay ice cream shop. There are 2 gay gelato shops. There are a couple of dozen of very welcoming LGBTQ restaurants. There is one strip mall in particular. I think every single store in that mall is gay owned and operated. They have 3 men's club fashion stores in that one plaza. There's a gay cigar bar, all kinds of different, very LGBTQ welcoming facilities there. And it's just like being in heaven. It's, if you can imagine going to your favorite small town and knowing that every store that you walk into, you can be there, with rainbows on, and guys can wear lipstick or paint their nails, and you can walk hand in hand in there and not be discriminated against, not be looked down upon, just be accepted for who you are and allowed to come in and enjoy the business.
I was muted there. So a lot like our Pride 365 message, which is, we want everyone to live their authentic selves. And it sounds like, whether you want to go out and have a drink, or you want to go have some ice cream with friends, or relax and have a nice meal, it's all happening there. What's the difference between spots like Wilton Manors and other places in Florida that just aren't? How does something like that happen in a state that we're seeing now, where maybe some other negative things are happening towards the community?
Well, partially it was a little bit by design. So in the 50s, when Wilton Manors was first founded, it was a blue collar, working class family neighborhood. But after 20 or 30 years, those families started to outgrow that environment. They wanted bigger houses. They wanted, larger plots of land. They wanted just a different environment. And of course, eventually a number of them aged out and went into retirement homes, or, didn't need a house at all anymore. So one brilliant realtor saw that there was an opportunity there, and he started marketing Wilton Manors as a place for the growing gay community in the 80s and 90s to purchase homes that would be less expensive than some of the neighboring neighborhoods, some of the outlying areas that were more expensive. So he intentionally established a presence in Wilton Manors and would show those properties to gay couples or single gay men or women who were looking for a house to purchase. And
fascinating.
So it kind of was by design. And then fast forward another 15, 20 years, and an entrepreneur, bar owner in the Fort Lauderdale area saw the opportunity in this shopping plaza where there was like a Piggly Wiggly and just random stores, was about 75% vacant. He opened a bar there called Georgie's Alibi and petitioned the city to turn that area into an entertainment district, which allowed for more bars and restaurants and things to open in close proximity to each other. And the gay population embraced it, and now it is a very gay welcoming place. In fact, just the other day, for the Trans Day of Visibility, City Hall was illuminated in pink and blue. The entire building was pink and blue uplights in honor of the Trans
That's
Day.
Great. That's really cool. And it's just such a great story. And again, finding something new out when talking to you. What about other places in the US? Is there a story or a spot that has stood out to you for for different reasons? Whether it's kind of, you know, the fight for equality, something anecdotal that you could give us that has stuck with you?
Well, one thing that I wanted to mention is that everybody recognizes Stonewall as being the single event that kind of ignited the fight for gay rights in the country. And that was not entirely true. It was the one that got the most media attention, and it was the kind of the last straw. But there were several, all related to some sort of a bar or restaurant that that predated that. There were a couple in the early 60s in California, in two different cities, in Los Angeles and in San Francisco. Both happened at places called the Black Cat, that had uprisings and protests regarding the mistreatment of gays and the fact that gay people were not allowed to dance together or to touch each other in a bar. You couldn't hold hands. You couldn't, put your hand on somebody's leg or shoulder. And there was an uprising there. There was an uprising at the Black Knight in Milwaukee that predates Stonewall. And there was one in 1959 in Los Angeles at a place called Cooper's Donuts that involved kind of male sex workers and drag queens throwing coffee and donuts at police, which, if you know the stories about police and coffee in the US, it's kind of funny.
I have not heard about the Cooper's Donuts riot.
Yeah.
That again, something that I'm learning as, in terms of history, American history too. Yeah. And why do you think that, obviously Stonewall is super historical and more well known perhaps for different reasons, but do you think generally in the community, like, people know about some of these other rights and these moments where you feel perhaps were more of the nucleus of how things came to be? Did they allow Stonewall to be Stonewall? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think part of it is, the time frames, because you're going from 1959 to 1969, 10 years between Stonewall and Cooper's Donuts. And so part of it was just the time frame itself. Part of it was the fact that New York is an incredibly densely populated city, and by 1969, was like the capital of the gay world in the U.S. It was, I don't know, is very well known. People knew what went on there. There was a lot of media there. There was a lot of a little bit more liberal coverage of things that happened in the gay scene than you might have had 10 years earlier. So I think that was part of it. But I think part of it too is that it was recorded, on some video. There were people that started to speak up about it. We were in an era that was changing the mindset about a lot of things. We were entering the time frame of the pill. So contraception and free sex was a little bit more open-minded than maybe 10 or 15 years earlier. People in general had started to have more liberal perspectives on some things. And I think that kind of opened the door for these people to finally say, we've had enough, and we're going to go out and talk about what happened.
Well, yeah, it's an image from Stonewall that we're seeing here. And then I managed to, as we were talking, managed to find a picture art of Cooper's Donuts. Wow. It was 10
Tiny little
cents for
donut
it.
shop.
Sorry?
It was a tiny little donut shop.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Look at that. And then I found a picture also while we were talking of, is it the Black Knight? Is this the
In
Milwaukee or
Milwaukee, yeah.
Wisconsin? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Fascinating stuff. Just absolutely incredible. Amazing. But as we wrap up our first conversation, by the way, Art's going to come back and we're going to be telling a lot more stories across the board. And Art's also going to be part of our storytelling team here. He's got so many. It's great. So this is part one of our conversation. One of the things that I thought that was important for us to talk about was the Brian Sloan article in the New York Times. And you mentioned to me as well when we were having our conversations about the history of gay bars, the journey, but also what they mean in today's society when it comes to the community. And you just briefly touched on it, but I wanted to revisit with you because you mentioned all of these other places, and Sloan's article talks about how you may be in a gay bar now and not know it. He mentions a lesbian bar from the 20s, a disco from the 90s, an affairs den from the 1890s, and the bar scene and all of that stuff. Why is this happening now, Art? What are you seeing out there in the trenches, having gone from so much history to now maybe a lot of that history being removed from our social scene?
Well, I think what is happening is, when I was entering the gay scene in the late 70s and the 80s, just getting my feet wet, the general feeling, I think, with a lot of gay people is, why can't we just go wherever we want? Why do we have to have a gay bar? Why do we have to go to a gay restaurant? Why can't we just be like everybody else and go to anywhere we want to go and be accepted? And to some extent, that has happened. To some extent, you're able to go into, a McDonald's if you want to, or an Olive Garden or wherever, with a group of gay men or women, and sit down and have a meal and not have too many people stare at you, particularly if they're in urban environments. So we've started to get toward that point that we wished for 20 or 30 years ago. And by proxy, what that's done is that it's kind of diluted the need in many people's minds for gay bars. So we've kind of split up the community. Another thing too,
is that a good thing? Is that a good thing in a way and a bad thing?
It's a little bit of both. I think the part of it that's good is that we all want to be able to go where we want to go. We want to be accepted wherever we are, and we still want that. But I think we need the spaces that are exclusively ours, just like people of color want their own spaces. For the most part, a Black person can walk into virtually any restaurant or any retail establishment in the country and be accepted. But they also want to have their own restaurants, their own bars, their own establishments, so they can embrace their culture a little bit more, maybe learn a little bit more about their culture, and not have it just whitewashed by what the mainstream public thinks it should be. And so I think we're losing a little bit of that, and you're never going to be able to walk into an Applebee's or an Olive Garden and suddenly find 50 gay people there that you can celebrate with and find out about what happened in the gay past. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So we still need the places so that we have a place to, just like a church, to be able to rejoice in our past and to celebrate who we are.
Exactly. And I love the Applebee's analogy, by the way. You did get me feeling a little peckish there, Art. There's no doubt about that. Okay, so why Pride? What does being a Pride 365 champion mean? You bring so much knowledge and so much great history to the table. What does Pride 365 mean to you, being a champion and maybe seeing what you could do down the road here?
I think the biggest part about Pride 365 is that it gives a face and a presence to people out there in the community that are gay and are able to accept who they are and announce it to the world. And all along throughout our history, most of our progress has been made by the fact that people started to put a face to the cause, whether it's for women's rights, whether it's for gay rights, whether it's for people of color, whatever the situation is. It takes people to break that that perception of what the community is. And the more of us that are out there proudly proclaiming that we are, gay, and we are proud to tell people about it and share our stories, the more people are going to have a personal connection with the community and be able to understand a little bit more that it's not just that one oddball that lives, down the street, but there are dozens and hundreds and thousands of us in any given community.
Yeah, that's brilliantly put. Excellent stuff. And I guess, you've seen a lot, and Art, and you're a very optimistic person. You've lived through a lot of change as well. And I'm hopeful. I don't know about you, but I feel like we've scratched the surface, but there's another layer of dirt that we got to get through. And it seems like every single time a layer is piled on, somehow, some way, the community gets together and fights through it. And it does take the younger generation to help do that. And they may be doing things a little bit differently. But I just wondered how you felt about that as we kind of end our conversation. We need to still keep sharing the history, but it's going to be down to that younger generation to keep it alive.
Yeah, and fortunately, I think a number of them are understanding that now. In the last couple of years here in Florida and throughout the U.S., we've been bombarded with a lot of threats and legislation and different things that have kind of put us back. A few years ago, we were all rejoicing that we had gay marriage, and now everything seems to be sliding in the opposite direction. A perfect example, we talked about Wilton Manors a little while ago. I was in Wilton Manors last week, and on 10 days notice from the time Florida started talking about banning drag and the don't say gay things and all that, within 10 days, the city of Wilton Manors movers and shakers, one of the city commissioners, a vice mayor, some business leaders all got together, and they planned an event that was called the High Heel March. And they had people come to the community center, the gay community center there, 10 days after they even started talking about it. And the turnout was greater than what you would see in a lot of small town prides. There were hundreds and hundreds of people filling the park to march down Wilton Drive and to show their support for the drag queens and for the gay community in general. It was amazing.
It's amazing. And a mix of people, straight people as well. Yeah, that's what's important, and that's what's going to continue to drive the conversation forward. This has been a fabulous conversation. Loved every minute of it. Let everyone know where they can find you. I have been sharing your website, but tell everyone where they can find you, what you've got coming up, what you'd like to share in particular for people to keep their ears and eyes peeled for.
So the best way to find everything is to go to the website, GAYBARCHIVES.com. And on that homepage, you have links to all of my social media profiles. Everything is at GAYBARCHIVES. So the Facebook is at GAYBARCHIVES, Twitter at GAYBARCHIVES, YouTube at GAYBARCHIVES. You can also do a Google search for GAYBARCHIVES or hashtag GAYBARCHIVES, and you'll find a ton of stuff there. The best way is just to interact, to join the Facebook group, to tell people your stories and your memories of the gay bars from the past, because there's no one person on this planet who can know them all and who can record them all. So, it takes a village, as they say.
It does. And your village is definitely a fun one. There's no doubt about that. Art Smith, Pride 365 champion and founder of GAYBARCHIVES. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's just the beginning. Please do subscribe to the channel, everybody. Hit the like button, share with all your favorite people. We'll be bringing more content as Pride 365 delves into a little bit more of this type of stuff. We shall see you soon. On behalf of Jack Mizell, the founder of Pride 365, Art, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.